Hello, my name is Stacey Stewart, and today I'll be discussing deficit thinking and its relevance within society and educational systems. What is deficit thinking, and why does it affect Indigenous people so profoundly? We'll begin to explore and unpack this concept of deficit thinking through the Aboriginal performer Stephen Oliver. Deficit thinking is not a simple topic. It's complex because it uncovers the beliefs, values, and attitudes society holds through racial bias. Deficit thinking is a prominent model that demonstrates students who fall into a lower socioeconomic statuses have differences and deficiencies, or children that hold limitations prevent the students from learning. Therefore, teachers will hold lower expectations for the child. You may be wondering why racial bias and deficit thinking affect Indigenous students and their educational pathways. The interrelationship between Indigenous people and negative labels or stereotypes have been prominent following the assimilation policy in 1937, when white supremacy was outstanding. Social constructions of indigeneity illustrate how stereotyping has been used to justify behaviours towards outgroup homogeneity. Through constructed beliefs, Indigenous peoples are associated with obtaining low socioeconomic statuses, lacking intelligence, or obtain limitations in everyday life. These beliefs are carried out through educational systems, leading educators into a deficit mindset, that falling into specific categories equate to a lack of intelligence. I'll present you a clip, "I'm a Black Fella," by Indigenous performer Stephen Oliver as we continue to delve deeper into the implications of deficit thinking.
I'm a black fella. Not a drunk, criminal, uneducated, unemployed, welfare-dependent slack fella. And if you try to tell me different, well, you might just get a smack fella. Not that I condone violence. I just don't condone silence. And when you try to tell me about what it means to be an Aborigine, with your stupid-ass jokes, stereotypes, and Discovery Channel mentalities, yeah, well, I'm afraid I have to speak up and let you know about me. See, I ain't what you're seeing in your travel magazine. And I haven't got the look from your history book. Noble? Maybe. Savage? No. Unless you're talking about my words and the way that they flow, but this isn't about style. It's about attitudes. It's about people who formulate their ill-informed views, who switch on the TV and then suddenly, out of the blue, they know all about me. Oh, he comes from that race involved in that car chase. It's such a disgrace what they do to the place. You know what's a disgrace? Fucking blackface. I mean, seriously, in this day and age, you want to learn about me, you need to learn to engage. Don't base your decisions on things that you see. Make up your mind by talking to me. I won't rob you or beg, and I won't try to fight you. But if you're a man and you're hot, I might like you.
This performance by Stephen Oliver illustrates how the beliefs attached to Indigenous peoples affects how they're represented in society today. Stephen Oliver implies that perceptions can be deceiving. So how does this statement influence deficit thinking in schools? An example will be provided for a more precise understanding of this complex topic in order to gain critical insight into how deficit thinking arises. Stephen Oliver draws on the belief obtained by society that Indigenous peoples are often viewed as having lower socioeconomic status. For educators, this belief demonstrates the lack of money is equal to fewer supplies, resources, lower support, and opportunities. Therefore, educators act accordingly and begin to hold lower academic achievements and expectations for the child. Holding low expectations for students put them in a position of disempowerment. This position of disempowerment allows Indigenous students to obtain a self-fulfilling prophecy and perform to the standards in which they're expected of them. In deficit thinking, this is a low expectation. So we begin to understand why deficit thinking affects Indigenous students in classrooms. The expectations placed upon students influence how we expect Indigenous students to perform. Deficit thinking is tantamount to the process of blaming the victim. It's a model founded on imputation, not documentation. How can we blame Indigenous students for living up to our low expectations if the white majority has formed these beliefs through the perpetuation of stereotypes? Holding expectations for Indigenous students due to beliefs about their cultural background, socioeconomic status, or because of their differences contextualizes what it means to be a deficit thinker. Stephen Oliver's performance demonstrates how fundamental it is to develop your attitudes, values, and beliefs about Indigenous peoples rather than following and forming a racial bias. As educators, we must strive to not place negative labels on Indigenous students and must push to be a part of cultural revitalisation. As future educators of diverse students, we must challenge deficit thinking and perpetuated stereotypes to remove barriers between expectations and Indigenous students, as Stephen Oliver does in his I Am a Black Fella performance.